Yo, I'm gonna check my audio. I was yelling at some fucking, what would I call him? Yeah, my mic audio is fucked because I yelled at that guy. Like an auto gain or something. He was defending Google for censoring people. Like, my god. My god, dude. It's like at least the Jews in the concentration camps didn't defend the Nazis, right? Oh, the Nazis aren't. It's the private corporation. The concentration camp is a private company, so it's okay for them to gas us because it's a private company. Jesus Christ. Auschwitz is a private company. Effects on the world of labor. We now come face to face with one of the modern world's most crucial problems, the world of labor, i.e., the condition of the worker. Created by technological developments, used in the beginning by capitalism and used now by socialism. Socialism has claimed that the worker's condition was the fruit of capitalism and of the exploitation of workers by finance capital. This does, to some extent, explain both the depressed condition of the worker and, undoubtedly, the class struggle in certain of its elements. What? That must be a typo. But it is not the major factor. Labor conditions result from the relation between man and machine and are a consequence of technological developments taken in the broad sense. Urbanization, massification, streamlining, the disappearance of the notion of work, mechanization, and so on. All these are much more responsible for labor conditions than that the means of production are privately owned. This last fact leads to proletarialization, according to Marxist theory, but proletarialization is only one aspect of the problem. Once socialism has taken the means of production out of private hands, juridically speaking, what the fuck? Juridically. Juridically speaking. That's a weird word. Juridically speaking. Alright. Once socialism has taken the means of production out of private hands, juridically speaking, the working class, abstractly speaking, is no longer the proletariat, but it remains in the grip of the same concrete problems. Undoubtedly, the problem of poverty can be solved, but nothing indicates that it can be more easily solved under socialism than under capitalism. Few workers, except farmers, in the United States live in poverty. But one cannot say that the labor problem has been solved even there. If we look at the situation of labor in socialist countries, we see that the worker still is subordinate to the machine, that he has little personal life, that he is engulfed in the mass, and that he is prey to the problems connected with mechanical work, artificially measured days, boredom, detachment from his work, false culture, ignorance of environment, divorce from nature, artificial life, and so on. But we also see that the problem of profits has not been solved and that the worker still is not properly paid. The only difference is that the profit is made by the state and not by private individuals. In addition, we see that in socialist countries, most social legislation though as advanced as in capitalist countries from the point of view of security, family allocations, vacations, and all sorts of financial rewards, has retrogressed with regard to unionism, the right to strike, and work discipline. We see, finally, that the worker is in no way participates fundamentally in the life of his factory. In socialist countries, the Works Council may make suggestions only with regard to secondary questions. With regard to principal questions, it merely ratifies the decisions of a 5-year plan. Furthermore, collective ownership of the means of production is pure fiction. The workers own nothing and are, with regard to the machines, in the same situation as workers under capitalism. Whether it be the state or an entire collective, which must necessarily be represented by some organization, the proprietor has nothing to do with the workers in the factory. This notion of collective ownership corresponds, on the economic plane, to the old idea of the sovereignty of the people on the political plane. We know how much harm that idea, that fiction, that abstraction has done to democracy and the power of the people. I cannot pursue this point here, but I can assert that the situation of labor has not really changed as the result of socialism. Nevertheless, we must acknowledge that the attitude of the workers is different. Except in rare cases, the working class has given its support to the regimes in communist countries. It is no longer a class in opposition, but is really in accord with the regimes, and the concrete situation seems to be that there no longer is an attitude of rebellion. The workers put their hearts in their work, abandon themselves to their work, no longer wish to engage in slowdowns or strikes. This is so, no matter how much the anti-communists deny it. Something undoubtedly has changed with regard to the labor situation in communist countries, for the workers have not been integrated by force. What has changed, first of all, is the social climate. The worker is no longer excluded from society. The feeling of being excluded from society is felt very strongly by the worker in a capitalist society. He is a pariah, an outsider. The society obeys certain criteria and has certain basic structures, but the worker is not included in them. The problem of private property is only a symbol of the exclusion which, in turn, produces the proletariat. But in socialist society, the worker is at the center of a world that is being built. He is in an honored position. The society is ennobled by the working class. This is said constantly and demonstrated in various cultural, political, and economic ways. This climate has changed the worker's reaction. He is now convinced of his importance. He is also convinced that society is not against him, but for him. That this society is his achievement, and that he is being granted, or will be granted, the place he deserves because of the importance of his work. He is thus filled with a positive conviction that lets him forget or neglect the external reality of his situation. The worker in the socialist world no longer looks at this situation in the same way as before. He is now filled with hope. It is his hope that the coming world will be a just world, or, more precisely, a world in which the worker certainly will occupy first place. It is also his conviction and hope that every piece of work, every day of work put in by him has a purpose: to build socialist society, whereas in capitalist countries, work serves only to produce a wage and profits only the capitalist. There the worker experiences frustration. Under socialism, he experiences a feeling of fulfillment. The changes that have taken place in labor situation are not actual changes, but only those of a different perspective, conception of life, conviction, and hope. This is indeed socialism's only genuine innovation, but the transformation is effective. The workers work more and better, put more heart in their work, and accept strict discipline with conviction. In 1960, at a conference in Moscow, Leonid Ilyichev, chief of Agitprop, stated that ideological education must aim at increasing productivity, the norms of the workers, and personal sacrifices. I have already said that the principal function of propaganda in the USSR is to help fulfill the 5-year plan to speed up work, i.e., to increase the workers' effort. This reminds me of what M.G. Friedman has said on the importance of the psychological factor in working conditions and productivity. He believes that the psychological necessities can be satisfied only by the socialist perspective. Only in socialism can the worker, rid of his complexes and resentments, attain the psychological freedom that permits him to dedicate himself to his work. But nothing indicates that this is the only solution. Even the facts of public relations in the United States tend to show that psychological means not only change the general climate considerably, but also change the inner persuasion of each worker and integrate him more into his enterprise. But this alteration has not yet reached full bloom, and we must wait to see whether profound transformation of the working class by public relations is possible. This long detour leads us to say that the labor problem results to some extent from the factual situation and to some extent from psychological factors. If we want to be honest, we must admit that for the factual situation, no solution is available in any of the social, political, or economic theories. Of course, one can make the worker happy and give him security, a mixture of palliatives. Palliatives. Oops. Palliative. Serving to palliate something that palliates. What does palliate mean?
Palliative.
What?
Palliative.
Palliative. Palliate, to relieve or lessen without curing, mitigate, alleviate. Without curing. Oh, to lessen without curing. Palliate. Okay, so it eases symptoms. And now I lost where I was. Okay. Of course, one can make the worker happy and give him security, a mixture of palliatives already known and partly utilized, can modify the consequences of his situation, but not really the situation itself. One must recognize, without trying to make a mystery out of the working class, that no solution exists for its concrete problems. There is, however, a psychological solution. The modification that was attained by socialist psychology can be attained by other means, other forms of integration, other convictions, other hopes. According to the cynical formula reported by Vance Packard, make them work and like it. Oh, that reminds me of Huxley in Brave New World and making people love their slavery. From the moment one knows that, unfortunately, socialism has only psychological answers, one is forced to state that what is involved here is a simple matter of propaganda. The working class, fooled by the bourgeoisie, is fooled by communism in other ways. And just as communism has taught the bourgeoisie governments the use of propaganda on the political plane, it is now teaching them to use it on the social plane and on the problems of labor. Nowadays, we see complete disregard for the problem of labor and a screen put around whatever problems cannot be solved. As in all propaganda, the point is to make man endure, with the help of psychological narcotics, what he could not endure naturally, or to give him, artificially, reasons to continue his work and to do it well. This is the task of propaganda, and there is no doubt that if it is done well, it will make possible the integration of the working class and make it accept its condition happily. In one way or another, propaganda is called upon to solve the labor problem, to the extent that the problem becomes a political factor and can be treated as such in mechanisms of the modern world. Only those who do not know the capabilities of modern propaganda can doubt the possibility of such a solution. Of course, to make such integration propaganda of the labor class successful, several conditions must obtain. First of all, the material conditions of labor must improve. I have constantly stressed the link between propaganda and true reforms. But that does not suffice in the least. On the contrary, the improvement of material conditions of the worker can become a springboard for better revolutionary agitation, as history shows. A certain development of technical education and information is needed. The more the worker becomes a technician, the more he becomes a conformist. At the same time, if he is provided with a broader base of information, he will become more susceptible to propaganda, according to the mechanism analyzed earlier. Finally, some unity of psychological action is needed. As long as the worker is enclosed in such organizations as parties or unions, which subject him to a propaganda opposed to his integration in the society, the partitioning, which we discussed earlier, takes place. One of the most important factors in this connection is that in socialist countries, the unions have become organizations in harmony with the society and make the same propaganda. The same holds true in the United States. The unions, though they defend their members, are also organs of the society and in no way question the American way of life. Consequently, the propaganda made by the unions is important for the integration of the workers. But such propaganda, by itself, transforms the unions. Like the political parties, the unions have felt the need to make propaganda. One may say that, on the one hand, most of the propaganda effects already studied with regard to political parties also obtain for unions. But there are other, particular effects here which derive from the fact that unions are by nature organs of combat, of defense, which represent more or less, but undeniably, foreign elements in a society. Whether the society is capitalist or not, a union has its own battle to fight. This is inherent in the structure and rationale of unions. But from the moment that the union wants to engage in propaganda, it runs head-on into the necessity of using the mass media of communication. Of course, union propaganda has a character of its own. It is much more human, costs less, uses the devotion of union members, their close human contact, and so on. But it cannot help the great media of modern propaganda, particularly the newspaper and the poster, as the problem no longer is merely one of getting people to attend meetings, but one of promulgating policy positions and of setting up a true labor mentality. This presumes a certain intellectual agility that the labor militants do not possess. From the moment the union begins to use newspapers and posters, it runs into money problems, and the more propaganda tries to reach individuals, the more it must use the important media, and the more expensive it will be. The financial problems do not recede when the union becomes larger. The expenses for propaganda grow more rapidly than revenues, except in the United States. This leads the Union either to acquire its own instruments of propaganda or to seek financial assistance of a more or less dubious and constraining nature. One can give the example of American unions, which are the most powerful in the world and which have become progressively modified by the very propaganda that helped them attain their power. There are a few union publications with editions of several 100,000 copies. They also use film and TV. Over 200 transmissions from unions are broadcast each day in the United States. In Chicago, a radio station belongs to a union. Here, the considerable expenses are paid by contributions, but this rests on an accord between the unions and the employers. The employers have agreed to employ the only union labor, it is obligatory, and to collect these contributions by deducting them from employees' wages. This means that all this enormous propaganda cannot endanger the economic powers in the United States. So, a union cannot threaten the economic power of the United States, which is the whole point of a union. So, unions are bullshit. When the union hits upon a successful propaganda, it reaches public opinion. It wins this opinion over to the cause of labor, alerts it to problems of social injustice, and mobilizes people pro or con. Whether one wants it or not, this is the basic objective of propaganda. This mobilized public opinion will then translate the propaganda effect in one of two ways. First of all, union membership will grow. Propaganda obviously leads to increase in the number of members. But here we see a well-known mass effect. The more the union grows, the less revolutionary, the less active, the less militant it becomes. Mass lends more weight to its demands, but those demands become less decisive and radical. The mass union becomes peaceful and bureaucratic. Its moves become less and less spontaneous. A gap opens between its members and its general staff. That is the first result of alerting public opinion through propaganda. The second result derives from the fact that sooner or later the government will be affected by this development. It will then tend to legitimize and legalize such labor action in some way. This is also an effect of propaganda. But when the government legalizes a union, a relationship arises between union and government, which is not one of conflict. Its legalization leads the union to adapt itself, more or less, to its lawful status and to conduct its social struggle on the legal plane. What matters then is to obtain new legal concessions from the state. But that is a long way from the original objectives of a union. Thus, propaganda leads a union to become a have rather than a have-not organization, to present itself as a constituent member of society, to play the social game. This is true integration into society, and as a result, the union is no longer in opposition. Its opposition is purely apparent and fictitious. Whether from then on it becomes part of a capitalist society, as in the United States, or of a socialist society, as in the USSR, matters not in the least. The results are identical. The union cannot win public opinion without adapting itself to it, without accepting the essential premises of the society in which it seeks a public an audience and supporters. Here we find again the conforming effect that I have already analyzed, which derives from propaganda. Conformist bitches! I'll take a break there. I might read more later. Wait, I thought I was on the last chapter, but there's another chapter. Oh, it's not. It's an appendix. Oh, we're almost done with the book. We're almost at the appendix. There's only like 30 more pages. But then what the fuck is an appendix? I don't even know what an appendix is. Shows you how much I read. I thought an appendix was like the sources and shit. Oh, that must be something else. That must be supplementary material at the end of a book. What's the part of the book that has the sources? Part of book sources. The bibliographic? No. I don't know what I'm talking about. What is the structure of a book? I don't know. I'm tripping. I'm gonna try. I might finish this book today.